Welcome everyone to Let's Win KC Ask a Therapist Q&A. We have two therapists set up for you all to ask questions to. Introducing Autry, MSW, LCSW, LSCSW, Division Manager of the KC Health Department, where he manages programming of violence prevention, public mental health substance use disorder programming, development and oversight of outreach programs, and community based peer support programs. As a therapist, he is a licensed clinical social worker with a macro level lens whose work has focused on practice and implementation in mental health, education, and social justice. We also have Tami Vang, CRADC MARS, Kansas City, Missouri native, has served the community for almost 2 decades. Tammy specializes in addiction medicine and regularly attends various training to implement evidence based practices and share them with others. A strong advocate in the power of educated, sound, and sustainable community advancement, Tammy frequently develops internal and external programs to assist clients and clinicians in their journey. Tammy enjoys a good textbook and library search, but can also be discovered watching documentaries in her own free time. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off this Q&A with a topic: stress and anxiety and depression. All right. So first up, how does the person dealing with everyday stress, a bad boss, we've all been there, too heavy of a workload, lack of sleep?
How does a person deal with lack of sleep? I think the first thing is acknowledging that you're stressed out, acknowledging the fact that your body is not operating conducive for a healthy well-being. In all honesty, when this happens, 14 different chemicals is released into the bloodstream. Our nervous system is activated to where those chemicals enter into our streams, and essentially the feeling of anxiety or stress is there to keep us safe. When we are overutilizing or overactivated, then it creates what we call toxic stress in the body. Literally, the chemistry of our bodies change, which keeps us from being able to sleep, keeps us from being able to maintain an appetite, keeps us from actually causes issues with the gut, changes our pH balance in our bodies. We smell different. So when you have that much stress in your body or so much stress kind of in your life, essentially it's going to keep you from the things that's going to keep you going. And quite frankly, that much tension in the body just doesn't, it's not conducive for anyone's well-being.
Also, it's not sustainable. We are human beings. We are not built to keep going and going and going. And I know the stresses of just every day going to work, going to school, dealing with children, those everyday stressors are going to rise up. We know that. But it's important that you have a little bit of self control and hone in on that and say, you know what, I need to get this sleep and set some healthy boundaries with people, especially your job.
Sounds great. And then next question. How do you address the stigma around seeking mental health support, especially in communities where it may be viewed of a sign of weakness?
Well, I'll kick this one off if that's okay. Sometimes you have to go with where your people are. Seek out those services because they are available. Even if you have the smallest sect of people, there's someone available there. It does have to be sometimes a search, but also know what you want before anybody wants to get with a therapist or a community health worker. I encourage you, list out what your expectations are. Do you want a female presenting person? Do you want a male presenting person? Do you want someone who looks like you or someone who looks different from you? What is your learning style? What captures your attention? It's not a monolith. Take your time, and it's okay to go and see somebody and say that one doesn't work for me. Let me try this one.
Yeah, and just adding to what Tammy was adding there, I think so. Now we serve in dual roles. I think I don't want to speak for Tammy, but we serve in dual roles. As the executive director of the Kansas City Black Mental Health Initiative, one of our vision is like in order to destigmatize Black mental health, you have to diversify it. And what I mean by that is that we're literally talking about how much we know about addressing mental health. A lot of the stigma that comes from mental health is just the simple aspect of talking to somebody. And when you have traditional paradigms within a culture that are saturated in survival, sometimes talking can seem very dangerous. Telling your business to someone and not necessarily even ensuring that there's confidentiality. So one of the other issues when we talk about stigma of mental health for Black folks, or even for anyone really, is the aspect of just finding someone who looks like you, much to Tammy's point, or even so much as learning the different modalities and disciplines. And oftentimes when we talk about therapists, we are um, either miseducated or diseducated on what that is. For example, a psychiatrist is a medical doctor that provides medication management. A psychologist, although there are psychologists that do practice therapy, the majority of the field is really in depth in research. But you have licensed marriage and family therapists, you have LPCs, counselors, licensed professional counselors, you have licensed clinical social workers, you have CRADAC and MARS, you have those who have different modalities that actually address the specific need that you are looking to address. So much kind of doubling down on Tammy's point is that address your expectations, kind of what you're looking to address, and then kind of trying to do enough research to kind of find a modality so that when you do talk to that person, you're talking to them to the specific needs that you need. Statistically, also, it's proven that we're more likely to seek care out of people who look like us rather than those who don't. So a lot of times, those who do enter into mental health services are almost re-traumatized, and the stigma is doubled down on because of the fact that they'll go to community mental health services within a community that has high turnover, doesn't have people who look like them, or has a waiting list when the issue that they wish to address was yesterday or today. So a lot of times, just the availability of access to mental health services re-stigmatizes the aspect of mental health services.
Awesome. And I want to go ahead and take this time and share with everyone, if you have a question that you want to ask the therapist, you can also visit www.letswinkc.com and ask your question there as well. All right. Next question for you all. In what ways can therapy empower individuals to develop healthy coping mechanisms and communication skills?
Go ahead, Tammy.
All right. So there's so many ways. I don't know where to start. It gives the power back to people. This is your life. We're just here to support you in navigating through those tough times. You have the autonomy to change your life, and you have the autonomy to say what you will and will not accept. We're just giving you those tools to check back in with yourself. Oftentimes, we get swept up in the monotony of society, those societal norms. I am a woman. I am a black woman. That's how I identify. I have to cook and clean, and I have to take care of the children, and I have to do all these things. There's no obligation in any of those things. There is an opportunity for a break. So it empowers learning those coping skills, learning who you are and what you will and will not accept and what's best for you. And that goes back to my original comment about Choosing a therapist and destigmatizing that is finding out what you really want. And that can change over time. So, learning those coping skills and strategies and how you learn best and what's good for you is very important because it goes into every aspect of your life. I'm a big EQ person, which EQ is emotional intelligence. It goes into every fabric of life. So you have your self management, your emotional management, and your relationship management, and they all work in tandem. If I don't have good self management, I might let my emotions get the best of me, and I might yell at someone that I really didn't mean to yell at. So let me hone that in. Let's work on that. Um, so I think that answers.
Yeah,
What do you have anything to add, Cecil?
I do. Just, well,
A
like,
little bit.
no, just a little bit. So, oftentimes, what I'll ask people is, what do you think therapy is? Like, before we get to coping skills um, or even so much as like communication skills, I want to ask the person what they think therapy is. Because and I would ask any of our viewers to kind of contemplate this thought. A lot of times, when people refer to therapy, therapy is kind of put in the space of fixing. Something's wrong with me, and I have to fix it. But therapy is honestly about growth. Trauma stunts growth. It literally stunts the psychosocial development of individuals. For example, stage 5 of Erickson's psychosocial stages of development is identity versus confusion. That's ages 12 to 18, which means that as you go through life, you will be faced with more or less this conflict, and you will either overcome this conflict or submit to it. In other words, you will either be confused about your identity, or you will be able to know what your identity is. Stage 6, which is it's intimacy versus isolation, which is 18 through 40. So when you look at those ages and you look at same premise, the conflict, what wins? Do you isolate, or are you getting closer, having connection? So tying in what Tammy was talking about, emotional intelligence, what we see usually is that trauma stunts growth, where someone becomes confused about their identity, then seeks validation from others to be able to have a conceptualized sense of self. In other words, everybody else gonna tell me who I am. And then when you look at the stages 6, and I want to keep in mind that we just went through a pandemic where everyone was isolated mandatorily away from everyone else, where that stunts growth as well, where the availability and the capacity for relationship management becomes an issue. The fact that we're seeing in Kansas City that we're seeing a lot of emotional dysregulation that's ending up in violence speaks to these two stages that's happening, because when we look at these two stages, the perpetuation of violence happens within this age range. But again, it's not about fixing anything. It's about growth. It's about growing out of the trauma, learning from the trauma, and being able to manage a life that you want to manage, that you don't feel so obligated to having to feel or act a certain way because you feel that A, I was just raised this way, or B, this is just the way I am. And oftentimes the central focus of most of the stigma that comes with therapy, or even so much as learning what coping skills are, coping to deal with skills, things that you are good at, is because of the fact that the biggest blockage is the fact of that emotional growth and the stagnation of that growth, which only makes it a lot easier to stigmatize therapy when you think it's going to fix you.
Sounds great. Thank you all so much. The next topic that we're going to discuss is domestic abuse. What tends to be the leading cause of domestic abuse, and why do people stay in bad relationships?
You want me to go? 'Cause
I heard you. Right.
I have time. Okay, so let's talk about domestic violence. So there's so many components to domestic violence. If you're yelling at each other, I don't care if it's husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, uh, mother, daughter, father, son, any combination of those, aunt, uncle. That is still violence. That's still domestic violence. Um, and all relationships are not bad 100% of the time. So people grasp on, and I think we've all been there, where we grasp onto potential. Okay, but that potential, I have potential to turn around. He wasn't always this way. She wasn't always this way. I can bring them back. Oh, we can work through it. And then also, sometimes it's cultural. It's cultural. I cannot leave. There is no out for me. There is no solace for me. Or cultural in the fact of, I'm going to put up with this struggle, love, like my foremothers or my forefathers have done. I'm going to keep it up, and at the very end, I'm going to get the reward. Or I might never get the reward. It's called a heaven's reward fallacy. That is a cognitive distortion of, I have this thought, I'm going to get into heaven because I have done so right by this person. I am living the way that I'm supposed to live, and it never comes. So there's multiple reasons. And domestic violence happens every day, and we don't think about it. It's that emotional abuse, that financial abuse. And I would like to define the term abuse. Abuse is doing something with intent, intentionally, to get a result. I'm doing this with the intent to harm myself or others. Then you
Yeah,
have like misuse. Misuse is, I'm not using it appropriately. And then you have use. I'm doing this. I haven't really truly weighed the pros and cons of the deal. So when we talk about domestic violence and we talk about those sorts of abuse, most people don't even know they're getting abused. They don't. They have no remote clue that they're being abused. Or it's been so normalized within their family of origin, whatever they may look like. Maybe I live with my grandma, maybe I live with an auntie or uncle, or I have a generational household where it's been perpetuated. You don't know until you step out and do know. You can't know what you can't know. And a lot of people think it's just that physical aggression. It could be, I'm only giving you $5 for the week, or you don't love me if you do this. It's conditional stuff. Am I hitting on something? See, so I can stop.
oh no, you are because Uh, so to complement what Tammy was saying, literally, it, some of the conversation that we're having is about generational curses. I just want to start there. Again, traditional paradigms that are saturated in survival. In other words, the culture that we come from being about survival. You can go across the spectrum, and we can talk about intersectionality of where people meet. But the thing that I actually want to talk about when it comes to domestic violence is attachment. Attachment. There is attachment theory is the aspect of knowing that we kind of perpetuate a cycle of attachment. For example, those who present anxious attachment often are very insecure about the relationship, and honestly, it comes from a parental point of view. You will see a parent act this way in the sense of, have you heard of the proverbial helicopter parent, always involved in kids business, wanting to know where they're at, what they're doing, essentially almost codependent, making the child codependent on them. And then you have the avoidant attachment, which is kind of the disregard, not paying any attention. Anything that makes that person feel uncomfortable, they kind of avoid it. And then what you have is like the disorganized attachment, where you get a mix of the two. Where often in the past we would refer to as kind of like reactive attachment, where I hate you, come here. I love you, go away. And when a child is subjected to that, they're faced with this dilemma. Their source of safety It's also their source of fear. So what happens when a child grows up like that? Then they look for someone who is also a source of safety, but also their source of fear. And oftentimes those are exacerbated in relationships because essentially how you attach to somebody or how you have been attaching to individuals. This is when we talk about how people get picked. I like him. He is very avoidant. He's very mysterious. He has a dark side. Oh, I like her. She's very into me. She wants to know where I'm at, what I'm doing, how I'm doing, or vice versa. Whether no matter the gender dynamic or lack thereof, it is this concept of the availability to attach to someone else based on the experiences that you've had. And your insecurities that play into that will can often lead to domestic violence, where someone can be like, "I love you," and push you away. And oftentimes that's how conflicts start in relationships. But domestic violence also becomes about power. And there is a positive and negative way of taking and giving power. And when you start talking about how someone attaches to someone, you will see someone dangle that power. Someone who gives away their power freely and then becomes resentful in the aspect of that and then removes all choices. If you've ever been asked to move in with a relative and then corner, that is to an extent emotional abuse because it's the aspect of being of telling you, hey, we want you to come, we want you to come here, but if you don't do exactly what we say, guess what? It's putting you in a position of vulnerability, and not in the sense of weakness, but rather vulnerable to more harm. Hurt people, essentially, is what is the biggest sentence I can give when it comes to domestic violence. Because usually it's the person who has been hurt through their childhood experiences, through their attachment style with their parents, that then perpetuates that attachment style into their relationships, and it cascades down over and over and over again. But usually, domestic violence tends to start to center around attachment and power.
Also, real quick, this is real quick, and I'm going to be quiet on this topic. Women, if you are taking birth control, and I know this is going to be really touchy, and I'm going to touch it and I'm going to back off. It has been supported in recent studies that if you were taking birth control, the pill specifically, while you're courting another person, your brain is not at its baseline. So you may choose somebody to partner with that you may not have ever chose. So please keep that in mind about what you put into your body.
All right. Thank you so much. So, we did have a question to come in, and that question is, why can letting go or learning to let go be challenging?
Hmm.
I mean, sometimes we hold on to baggage. Have you heard Erica Badu's Bag Lady? We hold on to it because it's comfortable. Sometimes letting go comes with grief. You're going to experience grief. I don't know about you guys. I've had friendships and relationships that are just so comfortable. You know, it's not for you, but they're so comfortable, and you know you have to let them go. But there's a grief to that. There's an anger behind that. There's a what if, I want to stay. I want to. It's going to be hard, and processing that grief, because we experience grief every day, and I akin it to, and you processed it before. So let me go through this real quick. I'll give an example. You go to work or you go out in the community and you have plans to eat your favorite food when you get home. You get home and you notice that your sandwich, we're going to use a sandwich, is not in the refrigerator. Now, you didn't thought about the sandwich all day. You're like, I'm going to go and get this sandwich. I'm going to eat this sandwich. It's going to be far, right? You go in there and you're looking for your sandwich. Where is my sandwich? And then you go through the stages of grief. You experience anger. Who ate my sandwich? Denial. I know they really didn't eat my sandwich. And then you work your way through those stages. You get to the very end and you accept that you are not going to eat that sandwich today. That is a process that we all go through, and we go through it every day in some form, shape, or another. But when it comes to person to person, it's a very left brain deal, because the left brain is still processing all the stuff. The right brain's like, done. Your body's done. And it's hard to have that acceptance. So it can be challenging because, again, we hold on to potential.
So, what I would add to this is I would add, sorry, we were doing a lot of moving around. You might have to, no. So, we must make space for loss. We gave reference to the idea of letting go. Tammy is very on point when she says that we become comfortable in misery. One of the other caveats to that is here. I'll put it this way: negative capability. This term refers to our capacity to accept and deal with the unknown. So, if our negative capability is low, the capability of understanding, like, I don't know what's going to happen, then there's a large probability that a lot of us won't take that step. In truth, a lot of us have a moderate low amount of negative capability just due to the fact of addressing loss as a whole. Often, when we refer to loss, as Tammy was kind of referring to stages of grief in which we may go through, we don't acknowledge the loss. We try to do everything we can to avoid loss. Any loss of money, loss of car, loss of job, loss of position, loss of companionship. I could be in a domestic violence situation, but I don't want to lose. I don't want to be alone. I don't want to lose this companionship that I've been able to have, even if it's toxic. I don't want to lose it. We what Our negative capability is kind of exacerbated by our ability to deal with loss. If we struggle with loss, here, I'll just put it to you this way, very plain and simple: avoidance and navigation. If we avoid something for so long, when we have to face it, we don't know what to do. We don't eat. If we avoid a situation, if we avoid the context of abuse, or that this isn't a good fit, and I don't even use this as a relationship in the sense of professionally, jobs. People stay on jobs for years, hating that job. But the negative capability to think of finding another job that will be sustainable, that will be worthwhile, that'll actually lead into your growth, that becomes an unknown, and you will stay at the job until you find something that kind of matches or fits where you are. So the same thing kind of happens in our interpersonal relationships as well, where it's like, yeah, I got him, but I don't know if I can have somebody else. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. So when we talk about letting go, we must navigate loss, because navigation. The reason why we navigate loss is because we're able to face it. We're able to be flexible in that moment, and we get to lean in on our values. What I will say to the person asking this question is that there is what we call a choice point exercise, and I'm just going to do it really quickly. So there is a fork in the road, and on one side you could take the feelings and thoughts that show up in a challenging situation. On the other side, we could take the route of our values and the strengths and skills that we have with those values. In other words, the expectations that we have for ourselves when it comes to those values. Those of us who lean towards our feelings and thoughts, what that means that in any challenging situation, your boundaries will move like goalposts. Like, just well, I said it, when he does this, I'm gone. He did it. Well, I'm not going anywhere. That was just me saying that. I just, I don't know. See, the thing is, feelings and thoughts in challenging situations takes us away from the outcome we want, acting ineffectively, not being the person we want to be. while leaning on your values will take you towards what you want to be, acting effectively, being the person you want to be. A lot of times, the fear of the unknown is what is the hardest thing to let go.
All right. Thank you so much. And to the person who sent in that question, the next question that we have is what are some signs or red flags that loved ones can watch out for as indicators of potentially violent behavior, and how can they intervene effectively?
Isolation. Isolation. If you had someone who was really involved in family or at least moderately involved, you call and stuff, when those things stop, that's that's a problem. What caused that pullback?
Hmm.
And sometimes as a family member, you can't change anybody's mind about their partner, period. You just can't. They can be physically aggressive, they can beat them until they're black and blue. You cannot change somebody's mind about their partner. But what you can do is you can be present. You can interject in a healthy way more. You can engage that person, not in a combative way, but engaging them like, hey, I want to invite you both over to such and such. And then have boundaries in your home or boundaries wherever you are. Get that person talking. And then also, if you plan to leave, don't tell. You can support them in making an exit.
So, um, I had a client once who told me of a situation that she was going through. Um, she, she I'm a hypothetically speaking. One morning, having a very disrupted, being in a very toxic relationship, feeling compelled and having to be there. She had to rush out of the house one day, and the dishes that she left on the table, the husband was upset. So he gathered them, walked past the sink, and placed them right where her car, she parks her car, so that when she pushes the garage door opener, the dishes would be right there waiting for her when she got home. And as we had this conversation, she was very upset about it. And I said, "Hold on a second. Can we do something? Can we try to have a conversation about this? I'll play you and you play him." And um, she immediately acted as him and got upset. And I came into the room and I said, "Hey, can you tell me the dishes we're doing there?" And then she abruptly goes, "You haven't, blah, 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 you left the dishes, da, da, da." And I said, "Oh, okay. So uh, just so I hear you correctly, because I left the dishes there, you took the dishes and you walked past the sink, in past the bedrooms, past this, and then you dumped them all right here because you wanted to make sure that I knew that they were there." And she just looked at me. I said, "Oh, I'm just reflecting on what you just told me." See, the interesting thing about relationships, and you can kind of make this determination, is that you're looking for, you are much to Tammy, what Tammy was saying, like get that person talking, because you're looking for two things. You're looking for sustained talk. In other words, I'm going to sustain this behavior, or I'm going to change this behavior. Once you expose the ambivalence of this behavior, and ambivalence is like, I have stage 3 lung cancer and I continue to smoke. It becomes those things that are two facts that kind of fall in line, but they don't contradict each other. The two facts can be the same, can be true at the same time, but often they're in conflict with one another. For example, I love you, yet I hate you. So when you start to ask open-ended questions. Hey, can you tell me? Can you help me understand? Can you explain to me? Provide affirmations, and when that person is hitting the points, like, "Oh, okay, I get you. I see where you're coming from." And then reflectively listen to the person and say, "So what I hear you saying is this." You're gonna hear, "Yeah," or No. Yeah, sustained talk. That's exactly what I said. No, no, what I meant was, and then you start to see the ambivalence being exposed and the change talks start to happening. We can't change the mind of anyone. As a therapist, I have not changed anyone's mind since I entered mental health. Not once. I've not been able to, hypnotize or influence someone enough for them to change their lifestyle to the way that I think is suitable for them. What we can do is have conversations about seeing the change and the sustain, because two things will happen. One, those who are abusive, or more in the sense of, and I don't even want to use this word lightly because it's overused so much, anyone who shows narcissistic tendencies, or what I would call cluster B personality tendencies, consisting of poor, like just abrasive personality issues in front of you. There's usually two ways that this is going to go. They don't like explaining themselves, so they're not going to say anything at all. Yeah, that's what I meant, or no, I don't even want to talk to you about it. Which means that that person is sustaining their position. The other side is just looking for those who are willing to change, willing to do the work, and willing to do the uncomfortability of the change that's necessary. Change is uncomfortable for all of us. It really is, but it is the incentive that usually causes us to change. If I asked everyone who was online tonight to walk backwards for a day, no. Now, if I said we are literally doing this walk backwards challenge where you can win up to $100,000 if you walk backwards per day, we're gonna see some people doing some. We're gonna see some people walking backwards. It is the incentive of that motivation that literally takes place. And please remember, motivation comes in three places. It goes into importance, readiness, and capability. So even when you are looking at your motivation for staying in or leaving a relationship, how important is it? How ready are you for it or ready to leave? And how capable do you feel of leaving? Because that states the motivation for leaving. But you can find this out by having conversations of what's the best outcome for you. And if the person's not willing to talk, or if the talk induces violence, then you have your answer.
Sounds good. And then, as a therapist, how do you balance the need for confidentiality when the responsibility to report potential threats of violence, especially when firearms are involved?
You want me to go? You
I, I can kick us off.
kick us off.
So we legally have a duty to warn. Period. Legally, we have a duty to warn. If you say anything that looks remotely like I'm going to kill, or I'm going to hurt, or I'm going to do XYZ to specific person, we have to report it. Or I'm going to do XYZ to myself, we're going to report it. And we both have, I'll speak for myself. I have had to report several times. However, sometimes it's not reportable. If you tell me I committed this act or this crime, and I'll give an example. A person came in. I've been working with this person at this point for years, and they came in and they confessed to a murder. Now, you would think as a therapist, "Oh, I got to tell somebody, I got to tell somebody." Absolutely not. You want to know why? Because they didn't say when it happened and to whom it happened. There are constraints that we have as therapists. Now, if and we tell people up front, if you are a danger to yourself or danger to others, and you identify with whom you're going to hurt, including yourself, we have a duty to warn. And just because someone has a firearm does not mean that they will use it on someone else, or a child, or an animal, or something like that. So you got to be real careful, and you got to do case by case basis. And when I've had to report, I let them know that I am reporting. but we've built that rapport first.
Mm.
Say, okay, here's what you said, and I want to make sure that I'm hearing you correctly. Is this an active threat, or are you just saying this because you're mad? Because we can't say, oh, I just want to kill myself. We can't say those things here because I'm going to take this seriously. Let's walk through it. We're going to do some scaling. We might do the Columbia. We're going to get to the bottom of it before we start reporting. Did I miss anything, Cecil?
No, no, I got you. So, what Tammy's referring to as the Columbia is the Columbia suicide assessment. Um, what I'll say to much to add to Tammy's point, um, it is we are mandated reporters through licensure. If you receive a certification or licensure through any state, and the state has that, just speaking policy wise, has the if you have the suspicion that a person will do harm to themselves or others, then you do have a duty to report. It's a class 3 misdemeanor if we do not report. That being said, this is also why the conversation about safety has to be at the beginning of beginning of your sessions, or when you even start having the conversation. I'm even talking to to friends like, "Hey, man, you can't tell me that. I'm gonna have to ask you some more questions and clarify in order to be able to make sure that you're safe." Because that's really what it's all about, safety. It's not about ratting. It's not about telling. It's not about snitching. It's not about none of that. The idea of if I'm talking to someone who actively owns guns, I'm talking to them about gun safety and not gun control, making sure that they are safe with that gun, making sure that they're safe amongst themselves with that gun, and they're safe with others. I'm not. Now if they tell me that they shot someone, but they haven't given me any indication of when, where, who, how, what, then I have to just listen to that. There's nothing to report. It's just someone talking. But if you say you shot Ray Ray on in the 50s on Thursday, that's a little different. Where the reason why that's different is because of the fact that what you're doing is you're saying that you have intentionally not been safe, or you have threatened someone else's safety. In doing so, um, we we have a duty to report. But the concept of actually being able to have a conversation and having rapport with who you're speaking to, and I'm talking whether it be relative therapists or otherwise, it gives you context to what that person means, what that person is saying, how they're saying it. Sometimes it may even be just telling a story. But no way, shape, or form would I want any of my clients to feel as if, hey, you've come in here to tell on yourself. Our sessions are solely around confidentiality and making sure that we have confidentiality, making sure that we have rapport. And I'll kind of end the answer to this question on this statement. With great rapport comes great expectations. In other words, the more rapport that you have with me and the more rapport I have with you, we can expect you can have an expectation of me. I can have an expectation of you. And you can have an expectation of how I'll react because I've stated what my expectations are. My expectations as a therapist is that as a mandated reporter, I have to report any suspicions of abuse or neglect or any harm to self or others. As a therapist, my expectation is that I have to report any duty to warn if you insinuate that you will harm someone or a specific person at a specific time, or even if you have done it past or present. I set those expectations and I tell my clients those expectations when we start so that as we continue to gain rapport, I can also adhere to the client's expectations of, hey man, I was just saying, like, I was like, man, I'm gonna mess this person up. That's different. That's not saying you're just talking. You're not saying who, when, where, what, how, or why. Even in talking in the context of a conversation of having a fight, that's not anything that's going to lead to me calling someone saying anything about that. That's still your confidentiality. So I want to make sure that we're just covering the concept of that anyone who actually does end up talking to a therapist is more concerned about telling on themselves or what incriminating themselves that is not a that's not really that's not really a thing with therapists unless it's something that you're blatantly telling the therapist verbatim. You're giving details. So I mean, for the most part, as long as we have rapport, then you know what to expect from me.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. We did have a question to come in. A.L. Johnson asked, as a therapist, how do you prevent yourself from being biased when a client reminds you of someone who has hurt you in the past? Is it difficult to separate the person you're currently trying to help from your own past experiences?
Can I take this one? You know, I love this so bad. Okay. So, what you're referring to is called parallel process. Personally, I like to call it the Usher Raymond syndrome. You know, you remind me of a girl that I once knew. That's what's happening. As a therapist, you have a code of ethics. And if someone walks in and there is a possibility of you having a bias, you have to recuse yourself. Just like with a judge, if you are not able to get past that, um, if someone smells and people think like, it's just they look like somebody. It could be somebody smells like somebody that you were beefing with or had some sort of adverse or maybe very intimate relationship with or reminds you of your grandmother or whatever. You as a therapist have to hold your professional boundaries with that person or you can refer them to someone else.
Yeah,
We have to check in and every therapist should have a therapist. Every therapist should have a therapist. It's part of our deal. So we can process that in therapy ourselves, or we can process that with our clinical supervisors, or we can process that with our administrative supervisors or our mentors. There is checks and balances when we are entering into people's lives.
yeah. There really is. The first thing, adding on, just really adding on to what Tammy's saying, is that we do have a code of ethics, but there are several code of ethics that I follow in the sense of as a Black social worker following the National Association of Black Social Workers Code of Ethics and following the NASW's Code of Ethics, which talks a lot about this. And one of the other references are terminology that's often used where there's transference and there's counter transference, where we are not acknowledging or unconsciously acknowledging that we are addressing a situation that we've been through, or even that person looks like somebody. It is parallel processing, but when the transference is happening between the client and the therapist, it's kind of a stopping point. And the reason why it's a stopping point is not so much that the therapist continues to just kind of rule on his own. Even as a private practitioner, we need to ensure that we are having peer supervision. In other words, talking to another peer, having case consults, being able to get that feedback and being able to give clear feedback that isn't biased between from a very clinical standpoint or clinical supervision, whether it be from someone who is in a higher position or has a more administrative role within your agency. But even more so, it is important for us to, the first thing that we're taught, supposedly, is to check your bias at the door. To understand that when it comes to your therapy, we are not the experts in your life. So therefore, when something like this comes up, the most appropriate thing for a therapist to do is to refer to ensure that that client gets the help that they need. And I will double down again on what Tammy's saying. It could be a smell. It could be while working in acute psychiatric settings or psych hospitals, I refuse to wear any type of cologne. And I tried to go as hydroallergenic as possible when it came to any of the things that I use. And half the reason why was because anything can trigger anyone within that setting, whether it be, and I'm just walking past them. And it's like, oh, that was the same cologne that my abuser wore. And then I've literally caused someone to become dysregulated. The availability to actually have these conversations and almost give it the premise of telling your clients what kind of environment they're going to be in when you do meet with them is to everyone's advantage. So the way that we check our bias is by checking each other, by understanding that our practice understands that we have to check it at the door. That when I'm meeting and helping someone, no matter what their beliefs are, my job in that moment is not to have an opinion. And a lot of people think that and a lot of people come to therapists and ask, "Hey, what's your opinion about this? I want to give you a scenario and give you an opinion." That's not my job. My job is to provide you with reflection, be a soundboard that is non-biased and non-descriptive, so that when you get that feedback, the feedback is clear, concise, and more or less a reflection in providing you perspective rather than just telling you what to do, where to go, and how to do it. That also plays into the the parallel processing that occurs because if I, as your therapist, are telling you what to do and I remind you of somebody that you know, then you're just falling back into the same perpetuation of a perpetual pattern that you came to see me for.
All right. Thank you.
Also, we don't give advice. I'm sorry.
That
Oh,
was
We don't give advice at all.
yes.
We don't, that's not what we do. We're not in the business of giving advice or telling you what to do, or we simply support you in getting there on your own. We don't do any of that. So if you come and ask for our opinion, you're not going to get it. If you come and ask for some advice, this isn't the place for it. You can ask for someone else's opinion, a friend or your parent or whomever. We can't give you an opinion. We can't give you an advice. We can support you into getting to your own
Conclusion.
thoughts, conclusions. Yes.
Hey, uh, A.L. Johnson.
we've got about 5 minutes left, and I do want to ask these very important questions about gun violence to those who are viewing. So, the first question: what are some tips to personally manage anger, which may otherwise lead to violence, behavior, or substance abuse?
Recognize your
Checking in
threats.
with yourself. Go ahead.
You
You can tell
first.
we work together.
You first. Go ahead.
Okay, real quick. Checking in with yourself. Again, a lot of people have infantile emotions, happy, sad, mad. That's it. All I can feel is those emotions due to attachment. So really checking in with yourself, having that emotional intelligence of what are my emotions? Are my emotions becoming my behaviors? Are my behaviors sound in my relationships that I have? A lot of times, conflicts, we don't have compassionate curiosity. I encourage you to look up Kwame Christian. He talks very, very much about on YouTube having these hard conversations and having confidence in that conflict. We have conflict every day in our choices. Do I choose my white shoes or my black shoes, my brown shoes? Those, it's a conflict, but we learn how to resolve those really, really quickly. So I would say looking inwardly. And then also, I just want to touch on something. It's substance use. We don't use the word abuse because it's not something that's being done intentionally. A lot of times when people become addicted to substances, not a lot of time, 100% of the time, I'll live and die by that. 100% of the time when people get addicted to substances, it becomes their baseline. It's like breathing. If they don't have it, they will die. Go ahead, Cecil.
Okay. When it comes the reason why the good tidbit that she kind of gave when it came to that was the fact that oftentimes those who have anger issues self-medicate. It becomes what we call comorbid or co-occurring illness, where the anger is then treated with some type of substance in order to be able to get it down. So, in order to be able to get to a place, you have to understand that you have kind of like a primary emotional index. Like, let's just talk about a scale from 1 to 10. Uh, 10 on anger is usually like emotional indoctrination. I'm willing to blow myself up along with all of you because I'm that angry. I'm that mad. So being able to acknowledge where you are on that spectrum, like, and I have to do, as a person who self regulates in his anger a lot. I have to do it when I come home. If I come home at a 7, then I need to probably sit on the porch until I'm a four. Because anytime that I go into that house, ain't nobody, I'm not good for anybody. But it has to be first acknowledging the fact that you have anger to begin with, and that when you emotionally reason with your anger, I feel this way, therefore I am. That is usually when we start to perpetuate violence.
All right, thank you so much. And the last question that we're going to ask is, much of the work has to start in home with parents and guardians. What are some proactive measures that families can take to create a safe and supportive environment that reduces the risk of gun related conflicts?
Parents learn how to self regulate and seek self regulation. And I say this from the parents, not the children, because of the fact that much the same effect as I spoke earlier about attachment. We quick and fast. The Gabor Matai talks about two essential needs. Talks about attachment, which I kind of went over earlier, in the sense of the need to actually be taken care of, held, loved. And then there is authenticity, the availability to be able to say your truth, speak your truth. Parents are usually the first people to deny a person's authenticity. And what it does is it breeds a culture of not feeling authentic. It becomes second nature for us to be authentic, because if I'm authentic with any of the people that I am attached to, I will lose the relationships in which my life depends upon. So when you start to have relationship, when you start out that way, it becomes a lot difficult for both the parent, because the parent will deny a child's authenticity because of their own insecurity, because of the things that they are struggling with. So this is why I say it's more about taking the time to learn more about yourself, put the oxygen mask on first before even addressing the child, because if you can, then you can actually come to a place of openness and curiosity. And openness and curiosity, as identified in the nervous system, shows that you're at a space of safety. When you are yelling or angry or not able to self-regulate, it is hard for you to here. Case in point, two words said very aggressively: calm down. Doesn't make any sense. The only way that I can get someone to calm down is if I'm calm myself. So it starts with you first.
All
And
right.
I'll pick you. Go ahead.
We've got about a minute and a half for you
Piggyback.
on
I'll
that
make it real
question.
quick. So I would say I agree 100%, but also letting your children know what's happening. We oftentimes just drag our kids along for the ride. We don't tell them what's happening, and they're new to the world. They have questions. And when those questions go unanswered, a lot of times that turns out in aggression. And my mom or my dad automatically shut me down every time I ask a question. So now I have to force that question or force that answer out of someone. So be cognizant of how you talk to your children.
And the let it cry technique is a
Don't.
farce. That it creates what's the word I'm looking for? Psychopathy. it, uh, yeah. Don't let your if you have a baby, Ferberism, don't let them cry in the crib. They
No
are
Ferber
seeking
method.
needs. If a person doesn't get their needs, they start to find out ways how to get it when they develop, and it becomes not so good for the rest of us.
Not good. Dahmer.
All
No.
right. I want to go ahead and take this time to thank you both. Thank you, Cecil and Tammy. Appreciate it. And all those who submitted questions. Be sure to follow at Let's Win KC and also at www.letswinkc.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.